Welcome to another episode of Africa Leadership Dialogues, where we engage on matters Africa. It's a great pleasure to have you with us. Now, this week on the show, we host Wadzanai Chiota-Madziva. She is Business Development Manager at Google, and she shares her insights into Africa. You get to have your say on the issues as well. And we have Africa's Top 10. You're watching the Africa Leadership Dialogues. I'm Julie Gichuru. Our guest on the show today is Wadzanai Chiota-Madziva, Zimbabwean born. She lives currently in Kenya and works as Google's Business Development Manager. Wadzanai's experience cuts across multiple sectors, including ICT, government, banking, and retail. Prior to her role at Google, she worked as the head of value-added services for Safaricom Limited and as management consultant for Pinsoft Consultants. In banking, she's worked with Standard Chartered Bank in Zimbabwe. Wadzanai has served as an ICT consultant for the government of Kenya, where she led the development of the 5-year National ICT Master Plan. She holds her first degree from the University of Cape Town, a master's from George Washington University, and qualifications from Harvard, where she studied justice, and Stanford, where she studied democratic development. Let's get her insights into Africa. Wadzanai, it's a great pleasure to have you on the Africa Leadership Dialogues. It's an exciting time for Africa, particularly because as a continent, we're starting to show the potential through the mobile revolution. The world is looking and saying, hold on a minute, maybe there's something going on in Africa, and much of this has been led by the mobile revolution. I think the estimated number of mobile users right now, about 700 million, which is a huge number. So let me ask this, are we indeed leapfrogging technology when it comes to application and use of mobile technologies?
All right, so first of all, Julie, thank you. Thank you for having me on the show.
You're most welcome.
I was very surprised when you called me, so I think this has really been an honor.
Thank you.
Now to your question on whether Africa is leapfrogging. So this is what I would say. I would say, Africa, we have this benefit. We don't have to start by inventing anything. I think the leapfrogging conversation starts from there. Mm-hmm. We don't have to invent the base station in order to have mobility, right? We don't have to invent the phone even. We just adopt and then innovate on top of what we have adopted. Mm-hmm. So if you look at what the West and China and countries like that have done, they have built the building blocks for us. We've just taken plug and play and started to use. So we've caught up real quick. So I would say in terms of usage, and you're right, I mean, more than 70% of this continent is mobile and is communicating.
It's fascinating.
Absolutely, and is communicating. And not only that, right? If you look at it just from a technology perspective, more than a decade ago, we were desiring to have connectivity to the rest of the world. Today, Africa has more than 17 undersea cables coming into it. That's phenomenal in not a long time. And as a result, traffic is going. So whether it's communicating on voice, whether we are doing internet traffic, whatever, Africa is ready. I think the building blocks have been built that we haven't had to take the same time that the rest of the world has taken to get us to communicate with the rest of the world.
M-Pesa, everywhere you go, I go to conferences all over the world and everybody talks about M-Pesa and what it's achieved. But beyond the success of M-Pesa, what would you highlight as some of the key adaptations of technology that work for the continent?
Okay, so I think when I look, and I like that you've asked it as a question of technology, mm-hmm. because I think often we run the risk of using technology and telecommunications synonymously, right, as the same thing. And I think if we even just go back many years, when we moved from using the sickle to harvest to the combined harvester, that was technology, right? Right. We adopted technology. When we moved from walking to the automobile. Right. That was adoption of technology. So I think from a mobile technology perspective, yes, I think what makes mobile money particularly interesting is because it has gone across verticals. It is not mainstream what you would use a mobile phone for. It is banking and saving and so on. But people today are also using technology for health, for food, for entrepreneurship. We're using technology. It is, I think the ICT, in my view, when I look at it, is all about it not being an end in itself. But ICT is a means, it's catalytic, it's a means to an end. So when you look at it that way, and then you look across all the different segments that ICT is applied, or that technology in general is applied, then you can begin, the story of M-Pesa or Eco Cash in Zimbabwe, for that matter, begins to make sense, right? Because you think we are looking at it fundamentally because it's being driven by the telecommunications companies themselves. Hence the reason why it spotlights so much. But when you look at agriculture and the stories being told by the agricultural sector, it's a big story on technology as well and adoption.
What excites you the most? What excites you the most when you look at the potential, or you look at individuals doing different things, using technology, breaking the mold?
Right.
What have you seen that is most exciting for you?
All right, so when I think of Africa, if we look at it in the African context, I start by asking myself, we are talking about transformational growth in Africa. And then in my mind, what are the things that are driving transformational growth? For instance, consumer spending has gone significantly. If you look at where we were with consumer spending 10 or so years ago, and where we are at about 350 billion, if you look at where we are today, we are $2 trillion economy. Yeah? Consumers, largely driven by consumer spending, is one. The other one is, for me, the emergence of the middle class. The middle class is coming up, and I think a lot of Africa is rising is because you're seeing a capable people in Africa, and therefore delivering very capable and practical solutions. I think when you look at even foreign direct investment in Africa has increased significantly. Just 10 or so years ago, we were at about $15 billion of foreign direct investment. Today we're at 50 billion and more of foreign direct investment. Then now you overlay on top of that technology. And you ask yourself, in all of these factors, even in terms of urbanization, why are people coming to the metropolitan cities? And you overlay technology on top of that, and you can see then how powerful technology is. And that's what excites me. Honestly, seeing that we are applying it to be able to actually grow Africa in terms of the key drivers that we have for transformational change.
You're so upbeat, and just the examples you've given can't help but make everybody feel hopeful, and particularly because you point out, that this is a continent that is rising, and you're giving the examples that highlight that, particularly the increase in spending by the African populations, which means the market is growing, there's more demand, The question I then have, with all the opportunities that are emerging, are we responding to those opportunities? Are we making the most of them as Africans, do you think?
All right. So, Julie, I think I would start by saying this. Are we responding? I look at it in two ways. On the one end, are we responsive to technology? And I would give you an immediate yes. Okay. I would say we are responsive. Some for natural and obvious reasons, necessity is the mother of invention. To move faster, you adopt. It's the way we adopted the ATM, for instance, quick. When I look at it in terms of are we making the most, I then ask myself, it feels to me like a developmental issue, a developmental question. Are we sustainable? Are we leveraging on the technology that we have to grow? So then again, I go back to asking myself, when we look at Africa in terms of its growth, what are the growth drivers? What is it that we worry about in Africa? We worry about food. We have got over 250 million Africans who are hungry. Who are hungry. That's about 25%, right, of our African population, food. What about the youth dividend?
So that's a tragedy, but an opportunity.
Yes,
this is what
absolutely.
You're saying.
We also have 75%. It's a tragedy, but an opportunity.
Okay.
We have the youth dividend. we have the youth to think about, we have health, maternal health. These are the things that we think about in Africa, right? These are issues we want to solve. Education. Incidentally, Africa spends more on education than anybody else around the world.
That's fascinating.
We're at about 20% spending. The US is at about 13% spending on education as a government. So when you look at that and then you ask yourself, are we then making the most? I would say yes, from an individual perspective. As nations in Africa, I think there's a lot of work we can do. There's a lot of work from a developmental perspective because we know what worries us. And are we using technology to solve what's worrying us? Let me tell you, from agriculture, Julie, we have the largest uncultivated land in the world. We have over almost 600 million hectares of arable but uncultivated land. That's a massive opportunity for Africa. And there's the technology to help us to cultivate that land and therefore address the food issue. Are we using technology to do that? If we used and applied technology more, from a developmental perspective, I think we would grow in leaps and bounds.
Yes. Where's the disconnect? Because as you've said, at individual level, we do have amazing entrepreneurs with fascinating concepts coming up and growing businesses. And then you talk about agriculture, 250 million people hungry, 750 million thankfully are okay.
Yes.
But there's a huge gap there. Many of our communities are farming communities, many of us, whether pastoralists, or not, many of us have based our societies around agriculture in one way or another. So where is this huge disconnect, do you think?
My view is this. I think if you look at the several revolutions that have happened around the world, you look at the agricultural revolution or the industrial revolution, by and large, these have been government-driven revolutions. Fortunately for Africa, we haven't had to go and have centuries of trying to go through these revolutions because we're catching up and we've got the benefit of borrowing from other experience. The technology revolution, on the other hand, has fundamentally been private sector driven, is the view. When governments begin to take it as their agenda, not to create enabling environments only, which governments in Africa are doing very well. I mean, we look at Zimbabwe, for example. I like to give an example. This is my country. Zimbabwe, today we've got some economic challenges, correct? But then you look at this superstar called Ecodet, who's already on LTE, 4G technology, and so on. And therefore, what are we saying? The government is creating, governments in Africa create the enabling environment today, which is fantastic. But when governments in Africa then also go on the other side and become the consumer and begin to drive the conversation of development through technology, I think that gap will close.
Is it happening, do you think?
I don't think it's happening nearly as much as it could. If it was happening, health would not be the issue it is today. And in fact, significant amounts of adoption of technology for health, for poverty reduction and so on, are still private sector from the technology perspective, private sector led. So because they're private sector led, they're coming through as businesses. I will set up my business to develop some piece of technology that I will sell and could be used in agriculture and so on. But when governments take it on, then you have the benefits of subsidies, trade barriers, all these things, incentives, policy, and so on, that actually, and then it comes and it becomes topical in the minds of the private sector to solve these problems or to assist in solving them.
Fantastic. Wadzanai, you're Zimbabwean, married to a Zimbabwean. You've lived in South Africa, you've lived in Kenya for many years. You've studied all over the place, including Stanford and Harvard. What do you feel when someone says Africa? What does it mean to you?
First of all, I love Africa. I think it is, from whichever level in my life I've been excessively proud to be an African.
You're making me tearful.
And you know why? Because when I think about Africa, I think of the resource base it has. The world's natural resources are depleting. Africa has them in phenomenal quantity, untapped, but they are here. And we are discovering them every day. Even in Kenya, we are discovering water in Turkana. I mean, can you imagine that? And that's the first thing. The second thing for me is Africa has got close to the largest. I think in the next 10 to 20 years, we will have the largest workforce in the world. Ahead of China, ahead of the West, the largest workforce. Whether they are working or not is another thing, but we have definitely the largest workforce in the world. For me, Africa is about, honestly, adoption of solutions, technology, to actually make a huge leap in the lifestyles of local people in Africa. And I think the building blocks have been set. We have it all. So I think Africa is full of hope. And not just hope. Actually, we are living the hope. We are living it. We are living it now. I think we are living it. I think another exciting thing that we're beginning to see in Africa is we're getting very enthused, very excited leadership starting to come up. Young, youthful, excited and motivated leadership that takes Africa to the next level. And I think this is fantastic because we are growing also. I mean, we are 50 years old. We've got another 50. And if you look at what we've achieved in 50, can you imagine what we're going to achieve in the next 50? Phenomenal.
You've got to be contagious because I'm feeling it. If you're not feeling it at home watching this show, then I don't know how you could possibly disconnect, because I feel so excited. But what would you say we need from our leadership and our citizenry to make it through those next 50 years and to look back and say, wow, look at what we've achieved? And I ask this particularly because, as was also highlighted by one of the guests on this show, Ambassador Martin Kimani, a lot of our opportunities stem from our greatest threats. So what do we need from our leadership and our citizenry to really make it to a successful conclusion in terms of development?
For me, the first thing that comes to mind is security. This is out of the hands of citizens. It is a huge leadership issue. Africa has to be secure, because when it's not secure, even Africans leave. Forget about the foreign investment we want. The Africans leave if it's not secure, especially because we are able to. You know, we're talking about the fact that I think in the next probably 10 years, maybe 20, more than 50% of Africans who have discretionary budgets, they'll be able to spend, at will. Today, we still have this gap between the poor and the wealthy, but it's closing fast. So if Africa is not secure, we will leave. People will leave naturally. So I think, for me, first and foremost, we need to address that, and the leadership can. Secondly, I think we need to address food. I say this everywhere, but food is key. Because you know what? In Africa today, Julie, health is expensive. And the first defense against any medical ailment is food. Think about someone in the village when they tell their mother, a child in the village tells their mother, I'm sick. The first thing the mother will do is make porridge. Food is important. So I think from a leadership to take us to the next level, we need to address security, we need to address food. Unemployment and all these other things will solve. Will solve if we go back to the building blocks. From the private sector perspective, I think we need to really, really figure out how to get access to capital, because the intellectual capacity is phenomenally in Africa. It's huge. Everyone has gone to school and learned something who is today in the working force, right? Everybody's. So the intellectual capacity is phenomenal, whether it's through entrepreneurship, through formal employment, whichever way. But access to capital is a gap. We need to figure out how to move money and grow it by doing some very exciting and interesting things. And this is something we have not solved. Most people who are extremely capable have no collateral. And if you're benchmarked against the collateral you have, in order for you to grow, then you stagnate, right, don't you? And I think this is creating a lot of dissatisfaction. Frustration, yes. And I think if we solve this, Africa will leapfrog further. It will leapfrog further. We have to trust each other is why I think the access to capital is a problem.
Stay with the Africa Leadership Dialogues.
Let's come back to technology now, and in your role as business development manager at Google, where do you see the money moving? And a lot of young entrepreneurs are watching, and a lot of people are vested in digital, and are innovating. So tell us, where's the money going? What patterns?
Or where should it come from?
Where is it? Where is it right now? What patterns do you see developing around opportunities to earn?
If I'll tell you one thing that's become a clear pattern in Africa is the technology hubs. People are trying to use and are successfully using technology to develop innovative solutions. There's a gap between the development of the innovative solutions and the market's readiness to receive that. And I think as a result, we have a lot of solutions coming out, but none scaling significantly enough to be able to say this is a massive financial story. But that said, there's still some that are really coming up as massive success stories as well. So I think it is about people becoming entrepreneurs through leveraging on technology. But if you ask me, and I was to use technology today, I would say, and if I was to advise on how we can leverage on technology to grow profitably, I would say the governments of Africa need to look at what they did when they privatized telecommunications.
Right.
Today, telecommunications, I don't know if you know this, Julie, but is employing almost 4.5 to 5 million people in Africa.
Wow.
Privatized telecommunications. Before, we had incumbent players who were running small shops. Today, it's phenomenal business. Now imagine,
no doubt going to grow much more.
Yes. So can you imagine if energy generation and distribution is privatized? Can you imagine if water generation and distribution is privatized? All these things. I think if that happens, there is a lot of money because Africa needs everything. Africa needs infrastructure, Africa needs food, Africa needs everything. So whichever business, even retail, whichever business you take, you will succeed. But I think we also need to privatize a lot more.
Okay. So government should divest. Government should divest and allow the markets to take control.
Yes.
And therein, yes, there is wealth creation, there is opportunity, there are jobs.
Yes.
And again, you had pointed out, we've talked about agriculture quite a bit, but that challenge, just even when you look at agriculture and the opportunities, do you think though sometimes private sector is too willing to move into areas where the winds are quick and fast?
Yes.
Whereas, investing in agriculture, and lately Africa has seen Asian companies come in and Asian countries, Middle Eastern countries come in and say we want to do large scale farming, and yet we're not seeing enough private sector players saying we'll take this space. African private sector players. What does that mean?
I think, for me, it's not a lack of interest. I think it's back to my point on access to capital.
Okay.
These companies that are coming in have it. We have to also have it. If we have it, we don't need them. I think if you look at us from one thing I'll tell you, Julie, is this for sure. All these foreign companies and governments that are coming in and investing in Africa know something that maybe we don't. They know.
What do they know? What do they know?
Yeah.
Right.
They know the value of the resource. So we talked about how we've leapfrogged a lot of revolutions. What we've lost in the process of leapfrogging is the learnings that they went through. So to you, when I say, I have gold in Africa, and when I tell that to someone in Europe that there's gold in Africa, perhaps we don't interpret it the same. They know exactly the value of that gold, and I don't. I don't know exactly its value because I haven't had to go through the painful process of learning what it's worth. So they know a lot. They know about what Africa has that we probably know we have but don't know its worth. So I think when I look at Africa investing, I would say, okay, so we look at all these different industries like agriculture or whatever, but then we need to think about vertical integration. Right. Why should I harvest my maize and send it back to you and then receive back from you the finished product? I should use the technology to finish the product and then send you a complete product. So vertical integration is very important for us, and I think it's an opportunity that we can definitely take. But again, we need the capital.
comes back to capital. I think that's a very powerful, lesson you've taught all of us. Can we as Africans learn to think like the other? So whether it's the Asian, the Middle Eastern coming in, the Europeans, South Americans, it doesn't matter. What are they thinking as they come into Africa? Perhaps if we had that perspective, we would better understand our own opportunities.
Absolutely.
You've really enthused us about Africa, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart for that, because we need more of that, an understanding of what a precious thing this continent of ours is. But I must ask, what do you worry about on the continent? What are the challenges that make you sometimes sit back and say, oh, this could be a huge problem for us?
I think, for one, we are too understated and modest about what we have. I think, therefore, we sell ourselves too cheap. We are understated. I mean, there's so much that we have going for us here in Africa. Africa, Julie, for me, when I look at it, is the world's next greatest marketplace. But we are so modest. We are understated, and it worries me.
Do we not believe in ourselves? When you say understated, is it lack of self-belief, lack of understanding of our own value?
Yes, and I think because we are young, if you think about the fact that we are 50 years old, it means technically we are still living with the generation that transitioned us out of colonization in most of our countries. And we still have baggage, right, that we are carrying. And it will take us a bit of time to realize that actually we are strong on our own. We command in our own right. It will take us time. And I think as the new generations are coming, it's a fantastic play for us, because we will then be able to transition out of this. You know, I like Bob Marley. I love Bob Marley, who says, emancipate me from mental slavery. So we still have this mental slavery. So I think we need to transition from it. This is what worries me. It worries me. So we have our own insecurities. The next thing that worries me is the fact that we have to address security in Africa. It worries me that we haven't fully addressed security.
Do you think that the crux of this matter is inequality and poverty, or is it education? What do you think we need to focus on to address insecurity?
So I love Kenya. I love Kenya because we've gone for devolution in Kenya. What is it doing? It's actually, in my mind, amongst many, many other things that it is doing, in my mind, it is including, it is about inclusion. It is including people that no one would otherwise have thought about. People wouldn't even know, do they exist? And are they on the agenda? And to what degree of magnitude are they on the agenda? Being able to devolve means in my own state or county or whatever, I can now look and say, everybody is my citizen here. And I can go deeper and start solving issues more. So I think it is that marginalization that also has brought insecurity, because you have people who are perhaps demotivated. You know, Africa has got significant number of youth. African youth are many. And when they don't have jobs, even if they're educated or not, it doesn't matter. When they don't have jobs, they don't have a sensible source of income, they don't feel that they're a priority. They may be a priority in charting out policies and talking about, it's like the women of Africa. From a policy perspective, they're a priority. Realizing the policy is a different thing. And so you have a breed of people who are uncomfortable. And that in itself, I think, is a reason we end up with insecurity. It's like your child at home. She's very busy and she has a lot of energy. And if you don't channel that energy, well, you get very incredible things out of that child, good and bad. So I think it's channeling the energy that the youth have, which is a phenomenal amount of energy.
Let's talk about that for a minute before we move on. And technology and our youth, it's huge youth bulge. Some see it as a dividend, some see it as a huge threat. I think it could be both. But properly used, as you've said, is a huge asset to this continent. Now, let's add the digital revolution.
Yes.
To the youth bulge.
Yes.
Huge opportunities, but now also huge access to a lot of things, including pornography, you know, the degradation of our social morals, you know, huge access to how to create weaponry, how to, you know, have revolutions. And we've seen what leaderless revolutions do to countries. Egypt is still in the throes of trying to sort itself out. So how do you think the digital world, you know, combining with the African youth bulge, will affect the continent?
I think from a academic, let's look at it academically. The youth are sponges for learning. They have far more capacity than the older, I think, generations to learn. So I think using that means they have access to tools to learn. Digital gives the information where it is needed. I agree with you, Julie, that said, there is a degree of responsibility that comes. To him who is given much more is demanded, right? Yes. So there is a huge level of responsibility. But I think, honestly, that for us, it is about creating opportunities. Because you can't stop everyone from seeing everything. Governments can help. Policies can help with you know, content control and so on. But you can only go so far. But if you're an idle mind, you will get into mischief. So when opportunities are created, all those access that the youth have will channel itself well. I don't think we'll need in the long run to worry significantly about it.
About the negatives of digital when there are so many positives.
Absolutely.
That it also offers.
I don't think so.
It's great to see and to hear the optimism, and I guess, you know, you've mentioned a child in the home, a daughter in the home. You know, I guess parenting, it comes back to all those values that, you know, are we instilling those things in our children? Are we holding family together? Because in this very dynamic world, at the end of the day, the fundamentals still remain critical. Paint a picture for us, Wadzanai. Your ideal Africa, what does it look like?
All right. My ideal Africa, first of all, is one in which intra-Africa trade is seamless, is easy, is frictionless, where we can trade comfortably. We're at 11%. There is a whole huge opportunity that's waiting to be closed by us. The means are there. We trade with the rest of the world far more. So for me, the ideal Africa is one that has ease of trade. The ideal Africa for me is one that has excited leadership that actually wants to take Africa forward and believes that it is possible, that is not inward facing, but is looking at the continent and looking at their own countries. There are many countries in Africa, right? And having unity with such diversity is very complicated. But if we achieve that unity in the midst of this diversity, I think we will have won. That is the Africa for me. I think it's one that is, I am more an African before I'm a Zimbabwean or a South African or a Kenyan because I know when I look at the continent, I'm one of the whole. I'm one of the billion and growing. Yeah, that's the Africa that I see.
There are some people who actually hold the argument that there is no African leadership. There is no, because we're just too diverse. So, you know, we're too separate. We're too disconnected. We're so many different states. We're so many different communities at so many different levels of growth and development that there is no Africa. But you've just said that there is, and we can connect with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, our differences are a strength. They're significant. Variety is good. It's a strength for us, I believe, because it enables us to actually apply those differences and be able to have diversification on many levels, whether it's in industry or social issues and so on, but leverage on it. Because then it means in Africa, for me, there's always another way of doing it. There's always a better way because you can compare. So the diversity for me is a massive, massive strength.
It's enriching.
It's enriching, absolutely, absolutely.
Finally, it's been such a pleasure. I can't believe we've come to the close of the show. Please look into the camera, Wadzanai. What's your message to Africa?
My message to Africa is very simple. It is that Africa is not rising. Africa has risen. We have it all with us. If Africa has risen, seize the moment in your lifetime because it will pass you by. That's my message.
Wow. Powerful. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Julie, for having me.
Stay with the Africa Leadership Dialogues.
I'm Wadzanai Chiota-Madziva, Business Development Manager at Google, and you're watching the Africa Leadership Dialogues.
What an uplifting conversation. I hope you're feeling it as much as I am. Now let's get straight to your views on the issues.
This week we asked you, how can we best leverage technology to address challenges in Africa? Lawrence Crispas says, security, banking, education, research and healthcare are some of the key practical benefits accrued from technology. Roy Gitahinduhu says, technology is a great tool to access individuals in need of social services. Handsets provide the channel to deliver personalized health and social security services to the citizen. Automation of processes removes time delays, bureaucracies and human factors leading to denial of services or social exclusion. Technology can be leveraged to leapfrog services delivery in Africa for health, education, food and social security.
Hi, my name is Alan Adenya and I'm watching Africa Leadership Dialogues from Ongata Rongai. I believe technology plays a central role in business and consumer interactions. In Africa, we have witnessed a mobile phone revolution. Mobile phone devices still remain the primary source where people can access internet. Most of the African countries are leveraging mobile technologies as a tool for their economic and social development. For example, the use of the technologies such as the 3G and 4G, where people have been able to access online banking, healthcare, and also conducting research in agriculture. Thank you.
To join our conversation, go to our G+ page, Africa Leadership Dialogues, on Facebook, Africa Leadership Dialogues, on Twitter, @AfricaLD, and on WhatsApp, send your video comments to +254 715 816 033.
Thank you for sharing your views. We always appreciate the engagement with you. Let's keep it going on all the different platforms. Right now, time for Africa's Top 10.
On Africa's Top 10 this week, we focus on African startup founders who built million-dollar internet companies. Starting us off at number 10 is Herman Hunis, founder and former CEO, Mixit South Africa. Hunis founded the South African social networking site Mixit, a free online instant messenger that runs on close to 3,000 mobile handsets. Hunis sold the company in September 2011 to World of Avatar for around $61 million. The site is a phenomenon in South Africa and now has close to 40 million users in more than 120 countries, with 40,000 new subscribers joining daily. Coming in at number 9 is Justin Stanford. South African-born Stanford, a software entrepreneur and venture capitalist, is the founder and CEO of 4D Group, an investment holding company headquartered in Cape Town, South Africa. It operates 4 major companies in Southern Africa, including ESET Southern Africa, IVs. It operates 4 major companies in Southern Africa, including ESET Southern Africa, IV Security, 4D Capital and 4D Privacar. He is also co-founder of Silicon Cape Initiative, South Africa. At number 8 is Adi PNR, founder and former CEO of Woo Themes South Africa. Woo Themes is one of the world's most popular premium WordPress theme companies. Working virtually with partners worldwide, Adi built Woo Themes into $1 million business, generating over $2 million in annual revenues from the sale of its themes. He has taken a back seat on running the affairs of all themes and is currently working on Public Beta, an online learning community for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs aimed at helping and empowering entrepreneurs. Taking the number 7 spot is Vinny Lingham. He is the founder and previous CEO of Yola Inc., a popular free web building, publishing and hosting services site based in San Francisco. Yola has attracted over $30 million in venture capital financing from investors such as Columbus Venture Capital and plays host to over 3 million active users across the globe. Well-known internet entrepreneur, Vinny Lingham founded Yola Inc. in 2007 and ran it as CEO until 2012. He is still a shareholder and a board member. The South African internet entrepreneur is also a co-founder and CEO of Gift, a mobile gift card company backed by Google Ventures. Jason Njoku comes in at number 6. The Nigerian internet entrepreneur is the founder and CEO of Iroko TV, the world's largest digital distributor of African movies. Iroko TV was labeled the Netflix of Africa, according to Forbes. Earlier this year, Iroko TV raised $8 million in venture capital from Tiger Global Management, a New York-based private equity and hedge fund run by billionaire Chase Coleman. Slotted in at number 5 is Kamal Budhabati, CEO, Craft Silicon Kenya. Craft Silicon is a Kenyan software firm that provides core banking, microfinance, mobile, switch solutions, software and electronic payment services for over 200 institutional clients in 40 countries spread across Africa, Asia, Europe and the Americas. The software company has a $50 million market value, raking in annual revenue of $6 million. Coming in at number 4 is South African Justin Clark and Kenyan Kari Eaton. They are the co-founders of One Africa Media, the continent's largest online classifieds group by traffic, page views, advert volume and revenue. Top Australian recruitment portal Seek reportedly invested $20 million in the company, acquiring a 25% stake. The Australian firm says it values One Africa Media at $80 million. At number 3 is Njeri Ryonge. She is the co-founder of Wananchi Online Kenya, a leading IP communication solutions provider, which has gone on to become East Africa's leading cable, broadband and IP internet-based phone company. Dubbed one of Kenya's most successful serial entrepreneurs, she succeeded in turning a $500,000 startup into East Africa's top internet firm valued at $175 million. Njeri Ryonge is also CEO and founder of Ignite Consulting and Investment Limited. Coming in at number 2 is Mark Shuttleworth, founder Thought and Ubuntu Knife Capital South Africa. Mark Shuttleworth is Africa's first .com millionaire. When Shuttleworth was 22, he founded Thought, a digital certificated internet security company he later sold to VeriSign for $575 million in an all-stock deal in 1999. It is the second largest provider of digital certification in the world. Shuttleworth also founded the fund's Ubuntu, a computer operating system which he distributes as free open source software. He has reported a net worth of $500 million. And at number 1 this week is Elon Musk. Born to a South African father and Canadian mother, Elon Musk is the co-founder of e-commerce payment system PayPal. In March 2002, Musk co-founded X.com, a financial services and email payments company. In February 2001, X.com changed its legal name to PayPal. In October 2002, PayPal was acquired by eBay for $1.5 billion in a stock deal. This designer, business magnate and investor is also co-founder, CEO and CTO of SpaceX and CEO and Chief Product Architect of Tesla Motors. And that's Africa's Top 10 this week.
What an incredible show. Thank you for your perspectives. A big thank you to Wadzanai for sharing her insights into Africa. And now it's time for our proverb. And it goes, knowledge without wisdom is like water. in the sand. And so as you gain knowledge, are you also applying wisdom to that knowledge? That's the big question. Blessings to you and blessings to Africa.